Hello, today I'm going to be making a segmented vessel for my wife's kitchen utensils, and I'm going to inset this Lazy Susan bearing in the base of it, and it's going to be about 9.5 inches in diameter and about 7 inches tall. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue 3 pieces of this material together for my base, and let's see how that goes. Okay, glue's dry. Now we scrape off the excess. Okay, there we go. In case you're wondering how I get my dimensions for my segments, I use a website called Larry Marley Art Segmented Wood Turning Calculator, and it will give you all the information you need to make your segments. It'll give you the segment length, the width of your material, the overall length of the board you need to complete each ring. It even compensates for saw cut for your kerf. It's a very nice resource to have if you're going to do segmented turning. I'll go into how a wedge sled works later in this video, but for now I'm just going to get all my material out and then we'll set up the wedge sled. Okay, let's do some cutting. Okay, now that we have our lumber cut to the dimensions we want, we're going to mark 2 sides of each one of these. We're going to mark them on the top and on one of the sides. It doesn't matter which. And I mark them up real good so I can see them during the assembly. And just mark them, it doesn't matter, just scribble on them. All this is going to get machined off later. And I just go through and mark each one of them like this. But this is very important during assembly of the segmented rings. It's important you do this. And you will see later. Okay, all of our lumber is marked now on 2 sides with a nice line so we can see it. I'll try and explain why this is important when we get to the wedge sled. So let's go over to that. This is what's called a wedge sled. This is one I made myself. They're not hard to make. There's not much to them. This one's made out of a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. Have 2 T-track runners. These knobs, these are 3D printed. I 3D printed these, and it just has a hardwood piece that goes into the T-track or into the slot in my saw. This is set up really wide right now because I'm going to be doing the base of this, but these are the templates that I 3D printed. They're for different, we're using 16 segments in this particular project, but I have them for 12 and 24, 20, and 10, and that's how many pieces are around in the circle. And in order to set this up, you make sure that it's wide enough to fit your piece in there, and that's wide enough. And what I do when it's wider than my template, I make sure my template is square at the end, and I set the back fence. And I just use this 1.5 inch scale here to move the back fence in, and I move the back fence in, tighten that down. Pretty important you get this really accurate. It's not hard, but just take your time when you're doing this and make sure everything fits nice and you don't have any gaps in between your fences. And then I will show you how to set it up. Once you set your template up, then you refer to your segment turning calculator that I showed you earlier in this video, and it says the segment length needs to be 1 13/16. That calculator will also do decimal. I believe it might even do metric. I'm not certain. But the way I do it is I pick one of the outboard teeth on the saw, and I set my ruler here to 1 13/16 on an outboard tooth. And this has to be pretty accurate too. And then I loosen this, my stop here. Get that right on the money. And then I just roll this back. And that is going to determine the length of your segments. You'll see how this works. And then double check it. And that's 1 13/16. And it's just touching that bearing. Okay. And now let's get to some cutting. Let me get my PPE on. And remember, lock out, tag out, unplug your saw, in other words. When you're changing blades, messing with the blade, always unplug it. All right, we're going to do some cutting. You want to make sure that your line that you marked on the side is always against the fence. And the top is always going to be the top. That's because each segment is going to be cut on the side of the blade. You want this side to be cut on this side of the blade. You'll see when I get doing this, but you have to do that. If your blade is slightly tilted, the reason you keep it in the orientation the same way every time is if your blade is slightly off, it doesn't matter. It'll compensate for itself because one side of your segment piece is cut on one side of the blade and the other is cut on the other side of the blade. So if there's a slight angle, you're still good. So let's do some cutting. That should be okay. Get some ear protection on and start some cutting. Okay, all the cutting's done. We have 200 plus pieces, plus a few extras. And these are a few projects I made a couple weeks ago. And next thing we need to do is take all the little burrs off all these parts. So it's a good time to play some music or watch some TV while you do this. It takes a while. And when I get back, we will be gluing this stuff up. All right, we're to the glue up stage. Probably one of the first questions you were wondering is, what is this? This is a sink cutout from a granite countertop place. They'll give you these for free if you ask real nice. But the gluing up's very simple. Just like what you would think. And these clamps are the best for segmented. I stole this idea from a guy off YouTube, a YouTube video I saw. They're really easy to make. If you run across the video, please post it comment on my video. But it's real easy. And I'm never shy with the glue either. Lots of glue. It all cleans up. And you don't, when you're gluing up segments, you don't want to rub them until wood comes in contact with wood. You want the glue, you want like a film of glue so everything slides real nice when you put that clamp on. If you squeeze all the glue out and it's a wood on wood, the piece won't move by the time you're done gluing. And you don't have to get everything lined up perfectly, because when you throw that clamp on, it's going to line everything up automatically. And I'm just going to do one of these. I have two of these full circles, and I will do some rings. And pay attention to your orientation. You should have a line, no line, line, no line, line, no line, and so on when you're gluing these up. The lines you put on the edge before you cut them. And that makes sure that your saw cut, even if it had an angle on it, it'll still match the piece next to it. That is, if your blade's not 90 degrees. I don't mean the angle of your segment cut. That has to be accurate. And this doesn't have to be perfect. All I'm doing is squeezing the glue so it won't run down or run out. I'm just giving it enough. Like I said, you don't want to be wood to wood, or those two pieces will stick together hard by the time you get all the glue on. By the time you get them all glued up, and then, yeah, it's kind of a pain in the butt when you do that. You just want to get them there. Nothing fancy. And all this piece will be nice and clean when we're done. You'll see. Kind of a mess getting there, but once you get there, it turns out pretty nice. And of course, I took all the soft fuzz off, all the little splinters, and I always put the clamp on first and make sure everything lines up. Sometimes you'll have a little gap in there, and you'll have to sand a little on one or two of the pieces, depending on how bad your gap is, to get them to fit real nice. On this one, I was about 1 degree out on one of them, which is pretty good for 16 cuts. That's really good. Those wedge sled does a fine job. You see how everything still slides nice? Looks like a mess, but watch this. And tighten this clamp up. Works like a tourniquet. Kind of exactly what it is. It could be used as a tourniquet, actually. And you want to make sure you move these up and down on the joints so the tension can go all the way around this, because you're only tightening it from one side. So when you move these up and down, you'll feel the paracord move a little bit to transfer that. You want to transfer that tension all the way around it. And you just keep working it and pushing it flat. And the bottom of this will be really flat when it's done. You barely have to touch it. You just can, most of the time, can touch it with sandpaper and clean it up. You don't even have to touch it with a tool when it's on the lathe. Then I go, if I have a little gap, I go and rub some glue in it. It's not perfect, but it'll look perfect when it's done. Nobody will know but you that there was a little gap there. And you keep pushing down on this to make sure nothing's sliding up. Keep putting tension on it. It's much easier on the rings than it is on these near solid pieces. These are the hardest by far to do. The rings, they're a piece of cake. They just go right together. You'll see. And on thicker pieces, you could, say you had a piece that was 1.5 inches thick, you could put another clamp on the other side, do one low and one high. That works really well. I've done that before. And the glue comes right off the paracord. I just put it on the edge of this little piece of granite here and run it back and forth a few times, and the glue just pops right off of it. And they come right off when you unclamp them. But there's not this much. I could have done 2 rings by now, and the time it takes to do one of these. I'm going to put a little glue in this crack here. Just a little bit. And then I always flip it over and feel and see if there's any, and that feels pretty good. So that's all there is to that. Glued up pretty nice. All right, now I'm going to show you how I glue up the body rings. And once again, don't be shy with the glue. This is basically end grain, and it just drinks the glue. So the glue cleans up easy enough. And again, I'm not putting these pieces, I'm not squeezing them together till they're wood on wood. I'm using that glue. I know it sounds funny, but it's going to be the lubricant for these pieces to slide into position. And this doesn't take very long. Once you get the hang of it, you get rolling on them. You can do one about every couple minutes. But when I throw that tourniquet clamp on here, you will see that it'll suck all that, or it'll push all that glue out. And plus this, by doing it this way, it gives the end grain time to soak in some of the glue. Oh, and again, remember to keep your pieces oriented correctly. With your line on the outside and the line on the top. You can see in here, that one has a line, that one doesn't. This next one will have a line on the inside, and all the line on the top, or the line on the top always stays on the top. But when you're gluing them up, you want to switch every other one. And that takes care of, like I said earlier, takes care of any inaccuracies in the angle of your blade. I know it looks like a mess, but and pull that paracord up so it's in the center, more or less. And give it a couple of turns. Make sure everything stays down. You don't have to put as much pressure on these as you did on the solid ones, because of course there's not as much area in between these. But see how all the pieces lined up real nice. You can go around and feel the edges and make sure none of them are poking out. And just like on the solid pieces, on the bottom piece I did, you want to go around and move that paracord up and down, and you'll feel the tension move around. And you don't have to put a lot of pressure on this, just to get the glue to squeeze out. And always push down on it. Make sure it stays flat. That'll save you some hassle later, and also you'll end up with more material. Because if they warp, you gotta get them flat again. And I hope I'm giving you people that watch the video some good tips. I do this just for fun. I did a review on the lathe I use. I got good reviews on it, so I figured I'd do a few more videos. And if anybody out there has got a tip or a better way of doing this, I'm all ears. And please watch the other videos that the other people put out. There's a lot of good information. That's where I got the idea for these tourniquet clamps. Saw a YouTube video, and they work awesome. Now on the smaller segmented turnings, I use rubber bands because they're easier, but trying to get a rubber band around this big ring is not easy. And if you don't get them on just right, pieces go flying. and that's never fun, especially when they're covered in glue. Okay, and then what I do is I take this piece off, I wipe all the excess glue off, and each ring I use a half a paper towel. And then I set the ring aside and I clean my, what they call sink cutouts at the granite shop. These work great. One coat of wax, just regular, any kind of wax, the paste wax you buy at the hardware store. I think it's Minwax makes it. Comes in a tin, just like the stuff you use, just like the tin you used on your car back in the day. And I clean that off pretty good. And then I flip this back over onto the same surface and push it back down, and it will stick. But that's a bonus. Keeps this thing flat. And then I let it sit for about, 15 minutes. And then I take it off and do another one. But I give it that 15 minutes so that glue has a chance to tack up, and then everything will stay put. And then I set it aside, usually overnight. But you can get away with, a couple hours. I don't like messing around with stuff on the lathe that is glued end grain like this. If it's by itself, it can explode pretty easy. You want to let the glue really set up on this stuff. I usually just do all my rings for the whole project, and then just make sure I keep them in order so I know which ones I glued first, and the ones I glued first are the ones I use first, and so on and so forth. But that's it for the rings. And once this dries, I'll show you how easy this paracord comes off of dried. Once this is dried, the paracord just peels right off, and I'll show you how to clean it. It's really simple. Now I'll show you how easy this comes off after it's dry. And one thing I did forget to say, when you glue these up, you want to measure across your clamp this way, or your tourniquet, whatever you want to call it, and measure this way. If you put too much hurt on this clamp, you can make these oval. I mean, you have to put quite a bit of pressure on it, but this is the same both ways, so it's good. So this one's completely dry. I'll show you just how easy these come off. They just peel right off. And then here's one with a bunch of dried glue on it, and I just rub them on the edge of this plate, and they clean right up. And what doesn't clean up softens up, so it's not gonna, it eventually all comes off. But and you probably get about 100 glue ups out of one piece of paracord, and then you have to replace it. So when you order it, order a spool if you plan on using it. And next will be, I'm going to show you, we're going to have a teachable moment because I screwed up a little bit, and I'll show you what I did and how I should have done it. All right, I'll explain my mistake. I started with what you see here. This is my back plate for my base, and I drilled a 1/2 inch hole in it. I glued my two pieces of my base together. I drilled a 1/2 inch hole in them after the glue set. And then I took this out of the chuck and glued it on. And then I tried to put it back in the chuck. So the teachable moment is once you have something chucked up in a wood lathe in one of these spindle chucks, don't ever take it out if you can help it, because if I wouldn't have done that, if I would have left it in the chuck and just glued it while it was on the lathe, like a smart person would have done, now as you can see, it's a little off center because this piece did not go back into the chuck exactly like it was before. But on this particular project, it's no harm, no foul. I'm just going to plug this hole at the end. I'll either put a wood dowel in it or fill it with resin or what have you. But also, the face of this doesn't run perfectly true. So I'm going to have to come and take a cut on this to clean it up. But this is actually going to be the bottom. But I need to cut the groove in the bottom for the bearing. So what I will do is I'll surface this. I'll put these lines back on, which are the inside and the outside diameters of this ring, with a little clearance. And then I'll put this chuck in the tailstock and bring it in and glue it on. And then I will unchuck it from this chuck and flip it all around. And then we'll be gluing our rings on. And that will come up next.